Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be unpacking something really fascinating that you shared with us.
Sure.
A podcast all about Surah-e-Fatiha. You know, it's often called
Quran?
Quran,
Yeah.
the mother of the Quran. And I think by the end of this, we'll see why that name is so fitting.
Yeah, and I think even for those familiar with Islam, there's always something new to discover in these 7 verses.
Absolutely. What struck me right away listening to this podcast was the hosts were saying that it's basically like a blueprint
Oh, wow.
for a believer's relationship with Allah. That got me thinking, how does a chapter so short really achieve that?
Well, they pointed out that it beautifully encapsulates some core themes, right? We're talking about praising Allah,
Right.
acknowledging his attributes, seeking guidance, and expressing devotion. It's like a conversation, really.
Yeah.
A dialogue between the believer and the divine.
And the way it flows right from the start. I mean, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, all praise is due to Allah, Lord of the worlds. It sets the tone immediately, pure gratitude and recognizing this all-encompassing power.
Yes, and it goes beyond just acknowledging Allah's existence. The next verse, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim,
Right.
the most compassionate, the most merciful. It highlights his loving and merciful nature. It's like saying, yes, there's this awe-inspiring power, but it's also a source of love and forgiveness.
I'm already seeing how this sets the stage for that relationship blueprint that they were talking about in the podcast. And then we get Maliki Yawmiddin, master of the day of judgment. Wow. Talk about shifting gears. It introduces accountability.
It does, doesn't it?
Yes.
It reminds us that our actions have consequences, but notice it doesn't instill fear. It follows those reminders of Allah's compassion.
Oh, that's interesting.
So it feels more like a gentle nudge towards reflection.
That structure is fascinating. You
Yeah.
praise, you acknowledge mercy, and then you're reminded to be mindful of your choices.
Yeah.
It's like a natural progression, almost preparing you to ask for guidance.
Exactly. And that's precisely where Surah-e-Fatiha takes us next. What's so compelling about these verses is that they not only express faith, but they also pave the way for seeking direction. And that's something everyone, regardless of their background, can relate to.
You're so right. It's like it's setting us up for this incredibly important question. What is the path we're supposed to be on? And the podcast hosts zeroed in on a term I've always found intriguing.
Okay.
Sirat al-Mustaqim, the straight path.
Yes. They describe it as the path aligned with Allah's guidance,
Yeah.
the path of prophets and righteous people.
Right.
It's not just a set of rules. It's about seeking a life that leads to Allah's pleasure and success in the afterlife.
It reminds me of how in so many cultures and philosophies, there's this idea of a right way to live. It's like this innate human desire to find our purpose and make sure we're headed in the right direction.
Yeah.
I think that's why this concept resonates with so many people. Even outside of a religious context, we all wrestle with the idea of finding our own straight path in life, don't we?
We absolutely do. It's about aligning our actions with our values, making choices that lead to a fulfilling and meaningful life. And Surah-e-Fatiha, despite its brevity, offers a powerful framework for navigating that journey.
And it's not just about, passively hoping to stumble on that straight path.
Right.
The podcast really emphasized the importance of actively seeking guidance,
Yeah.
of asking for help along the way.
Yes. And Surah-e-Fatiha actually gives us the words to do that. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in.
Wow.
We worship you alone, and from you alone we seek help.
Okay.
It's a powerful statement of dependence on Allah, recognizing that we need his support to navigate the complexities of life.
It's almost like saying, okay, I know I need to be on the straight path, but I can't do it alone. I
Right.
need your guidance Allah. And then it's like in response, the very next verse gives us, Idina sirat al-mustaqim,
Right.
guide us to the straight path.
It's a beautiful sequence, isn't it?
Yeah.
It goes beyond simply stating a belief. It's a call to action. First, we declare our submission to Allah, acknowledging that we need help.
Yeah.
Then we directly ask for that guidance.
Yeah.
It's a conversation with the divine, and it's at the heart of what makes Surah-e-Fatiha so powerful.
When I was listening to the podcast, I realized that for a long time I've been focusing on those last 2 verses.
Yeah.
The ones about those who received Allah's blessings versus those who went astray.
Right.
And honestly, I used to find them a bit intimidating.
I understand.
Yeah.
Those verses can be interpreted in different ways, but the podcast hosts made a really interesting point.
Okay.
They emphasize that it's not about judging others or feeling superior. It's about reflecting on our own choices and using those examples as guidance.
That's a great point. It's like, instead of getting caught up in who's right or wrong, we should be focusing on learning from the paths of others. We can be inspired by those who found their way to Allah's blessings.
Right.
And learn from the mistakes of those who strayed.
Exactly. It's a reminder that we all have free will. We get to choose our path, But there are consequences to those choices. And by reflecting on the path of others, we can gain wisdom and make more informed decisions in our own lives.
It all circles back to that core theme of seeking guidance, doesn't it? We can look to those who've come before us, we can turn to the Quran, and ultimately we can turn to Allah in prayer. It's like having this incredible support system to help us navigate life's journey.
It really is. And the podcast ended with this powerful call to action that I think is so relevant for us today. They urged listeners to move beyond just reciting Surah-e-Fatiha and to really delve into its deeper meaning. Because, it's easy to get caught up in the ritual of reciting the words without truly understanding what they represent.
It's like admiring a beautiful tapestry without taking the time to appreciate the individual threads, the artistry, the story it tells.
Precisely. And with Surah-e-Fatiha, it's not just about the beauty of the language, though it is beautiful. It's about the guidance it offers, the wisdom it contains, the framework it provides for a fulfilling life.
So what does all this mean for our listener, for someone diving into these ideas for the first time?
Whether you're familiar with Islam or just exploring different spiritual concepts, Surah-e-Fatiha offers profound insights into the human experience. It speaks to that universal longing for connection, for purpose, for guidance. It's a reminder that we're not alone in this journey.
And that even though we may stumble, there's always a path back, a chance to realign ourselves and seek that straight path again.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up this deep dive into Surah-e-Fatiha, let's leave our listener with this thought. What does seeking the straight path mean to you?
What does it mean to align your actions with your values, to make choices that bring you closer to a life of meaning and purpose?
Perhaps exploring these questions, reflecting on the lessons within Surah-e-Fatiha, will help illuminate your own personal path, your own Sirat al-Mustaqim.
Yeah, it really is a journey. And like any good journey, it's bound to have its, twists and turns. That's what makes it so interesting. And speaking of journeys, this deep dive that you've taken us on exploring this podcast about Surah-e-Fatiha, it's amazing how much we unpacked from just 7 verses.
I know, it really is remarkable. We went from, understanding its significance as Quran to breaking down each verse, to reflecting on what that Surat al-Mustaqim could mean in our own lives.
I have to admit, before diving into this with you, I sort of took Surah-e-Fatiha for granted. I recited it so often, it almost became routine.
Yeah.
But now I see it with fresh eyes. The depth of meaning packed into those few lines is incredible.
It's easy to focus on that ritualistic aspect of prayer and lose sight of the deeper meaning behind the words. But what's so powerful about Surah-e-Fatiha is how it manages to convey so much in such a concise way. Every word is carefully chosen. Every phrase is deliberate.
And it's not just for Muslims, is it? What struck me, especially after listening to the podcast you shared, is how much of Surah-e-Fatiha speaks to universal human needs.
Right.
This longing for connection, guidance, purpose.
Yeah.
Those are things we all grapple with regardless of background or beliefs.
You're absolutely right. It transcends cultural and religious boundaries. And at its core, it offers a message of hope, a reminder that even when we feel lost, there's a source of support and guidance we can turn to, whether it's through prayer reflection or connecting with something larger than ourselves.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to thank you for taking this journey with us. And more importantly, thank you, dear listener, for sharing this fascinating podcast with us. It sparked such a thought-provoking conversation.
Absolutely. And we encourage you to keep exploring these ideas, maybe revisit the podcast, delve into the full text of Surah-e-Fatiha again, or even explore other interpretations and commentaries.
Let the words resonate within you. See how they connect to your own life experiences, your own search for meaning. Because ultimately, that's what makes any text truly powerful, isn't it? It's not just about the words themselves. It's about how those words spark something within us, how they guide us on our own individual journeys.
And until next time, may you find your own straight path, whatever that may look like for you.